Hey there, friends. How are ya? Happy Saturday. Is today Saturday? Yeah. So, I was just thinking a little bit about anxiety when reading for others and the possibility of being wrong. So, what I thought I would talk about is um, kind of a hard topic to talk about, which is what happens when we're wrong, or when someone we're reading for says we're wrong. Um, why does that happen? What does it mean? Etc. So I it's an interesting topic, and it did come about because I was talking about performance anxiety earlier, and performance anxiety isn't, it's not necessarily associated with tarot. It's usually got a more sexual connotation, but it's an appropriate term, right? When you are reading for someone, um, I, you know, I I don't know. I don't know many folks who don't. I guess I should say it differently. It's not uncommon in my experience for people to feel a little bit of anxiety when reading for someone else, which I think, it's actually a good thing. I think being a little bit nervous is a sign that we care and that we want to do a useful, good thing. Panic, the other side of that coin, is bad because it's actually impossible to do anything productive in a state of panic. So if you're experiencing panic when you're reading for other people, there's obviously some other things that need to be dealt with. Um, but I forgot to. My dinner's in the oven, and I forgot to set a timer. So I'm gonna do that right now while I'm rambling, so that I don't burn my dinner, because that would be frustrating, especially because I'm hungry. All right. So, what do we do when we're wrong? Why does it happen? And how do we move on from it? Yeah, that's kind of my topic. And my aim is to keep this under 20 minutes. Can I do it? Let's hope. I have to stop making hour-long videos. Who wants to listen to me talk for an hour, right? Like, come on. Anyway, I'm going to try. But I'm long-winded. So, first things first, right? Let's talk about performance anxiety, or just the anxiety of doing it badly. Um, to be perfectly honest, that's one reason why a lot of my readings are done remotely, because I find it a little bit less stressful, and it gives me time to think, and it gives me time to look at the cards without the feeling that I have to speak right away. So that's one reason why I actually do a lot of readings remotely and video. I actually prefer not to read face to face if I can avoid it, for that very reason. Partly because there's a certain gosh, I can't speak, improvisatory skill that comes from reading tarot, that I'm not, it's not my natural method of communicating to just start talking, because I just, my whole life I've been a writer. I've been better at written communication, or at least communication that's been scripted in some way. uh I always have been a writer. I've always been sort of a scribbler of notes, and for a long time I was an actor. I mean, that's sort of how I started with anything. I was a tour guide when I was right out of right out of high school, and then for a few years after that I toured around New England, around this part of New England, doing puppet shows for third grade audiences about mental and physical disabilities, to teach tolerance and acceptance, and spent years and years acting. And then I worked in a call center after that, where the job is pretty scripted, and although a call center would hate to use that word, but there's a certain expectation of what you're going to say. And then I moved into training which is very scripted in a sense, because you are in a way repeating yourself over and over again. So I I've never been like a good improviser. So the more time I have to think and prepare and make notes or even write something out, the more confident I feel. And that's why I did a lot of my readings initially as written ones. I preferred it. Even when I read for friends or read for friends for years, I would often choose to write it. Um, and now when I read for almost everybody, I do it as a video. And the reason I do it as a video, even when I know the person and could drive there and see them, is so that I don't feel that performance anxiety, but also so that they can go back and rewatch it. Because I think we're going to get into the topic of being wrong in a minute. One of the things that can happen when you're wrong, in quotation marks, is that you're not wrong. You're actually more right than someone's ready to hear. And occasionally, the ability to go back and rewatch a reading or re-listen to a reading allows a querent to come at it from another point of view and to be able to say, oh boy, that was actually right on. And that does happen. It happens a lot because I think here's where I start talking out of my area of scope, right? But one thing I know about people, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but I'm a very observant person. And one of the things I know is that we as humans build mythologies about ourselves. We build a brand, and there's a brand that we want people to view, for the most part, that we present. And sometimes a tarot reading can pull back the curtain of that brand, or go underneath that brand in a way that we're not ready to hear or explore. And that can knock down our defenses. So, that is sometimes one reason why when we're wrong, we're not really wrong, but we don't really know that unless the person remembers the reading and thinks to tell us a year from now, or they go back and watch it in 6 months and say, oh boy, that was actually right. So anyway, yes, that's why I do video readings. That's why because I like people to be able to go and review it. But it also, performance anxiety can be an issue. And as I said, you can, nerves are good, right? Because they show you care. Panic is bad because it's completely distracting. So the thing that happens is that we need to ground ourselves, however you do that. And one of the things I'll do personally, is I ask for permission to be silent when I'm reading for the person. And I'll say, hey, I'm going to lay out the cards. It's possible I'll start talking right away, but knowing me, I won't. I'm going to think about it for a while and just start to see patterns. And one thing I can say with practice is that the patterns start to emerge more clearly, more quickly. So the more readings that you do, kind of the less need, in some cases, to be silent. That's how I do it. I have, I'm not, and I don't know, maybe this is a weakness on my part. I'm not like given to ritual or, I don't often feel the effects of things that other people feel, like with a scent or a color, a crystal. Those things, I tend not to be very receptive to those energies for some reason. I tend to be very receptive to other human energy. And so if the person I'm reading for is nervous or upset, I can often absorb that, and it amps up my anxiety. But I will say, for all that, one thing that has actually proved to be very grounding for me is quartz. I don't know why. I have found that when I'm in the middle of a panic attack, for example, or if I'm feeling very panicky, if I find my heart racing, if I hold on to a piece of just clear quartz, that calms me. I don't know if it's the act of doing it. I don't know if it's the whatever, if it's the stone itself, but it has been grounding for me. So finding a way to ground yourself when you're reading for someone else is also useful. But let's actually talk about the wrong stuff. So I've just pulled a deck out. This is if you watch my videos regularly, you'll have heard me kind of have some unhappy impressions of this deck. It is weirdly growing on me in a way. I still think it's too white, but I'm not gonna belabor that point. You can watch my other video that includes this deck to hear me ramble about such things. But that's by way of saying that it's actually grown on me a little bit. So what happens when we're wrong? So assuming we're doing a reading for somebody, and I look at Temperance and the Eight of Wands and the Chariot, and I explain that a time of balancing has really been beneficial for this person, and a creative project they've been really passionate about is starting to get some traction, and that energy and their passion and their drive is starting to like accelerate, and they're going out in the world, and they're sending that energy out in the world. Maybe they're off submitting to an art show or whatever the case is, and that's a good sign for their long-term spiritual journey as well as their life journey. They're managing to sort of corral a bunch of different energies, and that this project is going to sustain them in the long term, and that it's a very important project based on the two major cards, and it's probably very fast moving, and it's something they're very passionate about, and good on them. This project looks like it's going to really, really start picking up some traction, and it's going to go and be pretty successful. And, again, that's just a quick interpretation of these three cards off the top of my head. But I'm the person I'm reading for either is with me or they respond by email, says, there's no project I'm working on, nothing, that's not ringing a bell. That's just not, it's just not a thing. This does not resonate with me at all, say. When that happens, when they're in person, I'll often ask some questions, and I'll ask them to talk me through what they're seeing. I'll explain. I've done videos before where I talk about how our job as readers isn't to teach someone how to read the cards. They just want to know the interpretation. So as an interpreter, I try as much as possible not to get into, the Temperance card is the 14th card in the Major Arcana and is alchemically associated with the Philosopher's Stone. And, the Angel in traditional decks is often featured with a crown, and the act of doing something impossible. And, I try not to do that. I try to focus as much. I try to weed out all of the stuff that you would find in a tarot book and just say what I see. But I will, when someone tells me that what I've read is wrong, try to explain the traditional meanings and why I got where I got, and ask, what in there is resonating, what connects to whatever you're asking about, or what something that's going in your life, and hope that they're able to create a link for me that I hadn't been able to create. If they're not with me, I'll sort of do the same thing by email and present alternative interpretations. So, and there always are, you know what I mean? I might say that, this is a person who normally has a very temperate attitude about life. They're not necessarily given towards extremes. They're not given to impetuousness. They are temperate. They are moderate. And as a result, something has shaken their world up, and there's much more tendency towards extremes. The Eight of Wands being very fiery, very passionate, very direct, and there's a sort of a wash of new energy that's disrupting this old balance. And if they want to return to a more temperate life, what they're going to have to do is really wrangle this energy, channel it, and make it into something productive. So, I may offer that interpretation. I'll try to offer a third and say, there may have been a a time of addiction or dependence, and that has been overcome, but some stress or some ignition point coming from fire has led to some sort of rocky movement. You know what I mean? So I reach for a handful of alternatives. If I'm not, when I read for someone by video, this will usually happen by email. And I'll let them sort of, because, when I'm usually reading for people I don't know, they're usually paying. I want them to get their money's worth, and if nothing else, feel like they didn't waste their time. Even though, they may never read with me again, and they shouldn't, you know what I mean? If I'm not picking up what they need, then I may not be the reader for them, and that's another thing. So I try to offer alternatives based on what I see, and I will go to the kind of textbook meanings, how I got them, and I'll try to engage in a dialogue, even from a distance, of what possibilities may exist, and help them, or ask them to help me kind of recalibrate. And I try not to take it personally. I try not to take it to heart, and to downward spiral and say, oh my God, I'm a bad reader, I'm never going to be good at this, because even when I started reading, I did hit the nail on the head more often than not. And I think a lot of people do. There's just something about this that seems to work. Now, if in that dialogue, whether it's a face-to-face conversation, which is much easier, or by email following a video reading, if nothing I'm saying is resonating, I apologize, and I just try to explain my philosophy, which is that I may not be gelling somehow. And it comes down to kind of the question of, is it me or is it the cards? Did I use the wrong deck? Did I use the wrong cards? Did I pick the wrong, did I do something I'd never done before? Well, and at the end of the day, I have to trust that, from personal experience, tarot works. I've seen it work. I've watched it work. I've felt it work. So the variable in that case is me. It's not tarot. Like, tarot works. I know it does. And why on this day does what I always do not work? Why would I have picked the wrong deck or drawn the wrong cards today? I guess it's possible, but like I don't think that in terms of reading that there are accidents, in this, like, I think it's Yoav Ben-Dov in his book says nothing is everything means something. I think that's what he says, that nothing's an accident. And so in that case, I really do say it's probably me. I may not be reading well today. I will offer to try it again in a day or two if they want me to, or if they paid for it, I'll offer to refund the money. I don't like to refund it because, like most readers, I feel like you're paying for my time, and it is time consuming, not just to do the reading but to get it uploaded. That's a slow process. So but I will, if I don't want to make enemies, and I don't want anyone to feel like readers are charlatans or just trying to steal money from it, because it's not the case. So but what is the problem? When it comes down to why I'm wrong, I don't know, but I do know that it's me. I'm the variable in that equation, and so is the querent to a degree. And that's the other thing, is that I think the tarot itself is um the cornerstone. It's the foundation that doesn't change. I know what the cards mean. You know what I mean? The thing that's different is that a different person is sitting in front of me, and I'm not managing to connect what the cards mean to that person's life. And I just accept that. I mean, that sounds a little kind of fatalistic, but I do. I just say, well, it's I'm not in a good headspace today, and I should also say this doesn't happen that much, and I'm not bragging either. It's just, again, I think it's because this system works. But it does happen. I talked about in my last video how I have had times where I lay out the card, and like, not only do I say something wrong, like, I don't even get there, because I stare at it and I'm like, what? It looks like a language I've never seen before. It could be a deck I've used every day for the past 6 months, and it looks like something it just doesn't. Why me? You know what I mean? It's my mood, it's my state, it's my brain, it's, I'm dehydrated, I didn't get enough sleep, or I'm stressed out, whatever the case is. But the thing that I have to learn, and that I had to learn, is that I have to let it go. And I guess another nice thing about doing readings from a distance is that it's easier to be wrong from a distance, because they're not sitting there in front of you, sort of wishing for an answer you can't give. It's worth, especially if you have a relationship with the person that you're reading for, if they tell you you're wrong, it's worth journaling and asking them, is it okay if I come back to you in a few months, and ask if anything is resonating now. Has anything changed? Are you seeing something now that you didn't before? Even if it's not someone you have a relationship with, I think it's okay to ask, by way of saying, hey, I'm always trying to get better. If in the next month something I said in this reading pops, if you think of it, would you email me and let me know? But the primary thing, however you handle it, is to be, whether you're doing it for a friend or a client, I think the primary thing is to be kind and to not make it about them. As an empathetic art form, as I often talk about tarot being, I feel like we have a responsibility, unless the person we're reading for is just a total dick, to be kind and to fall on our own sword, in a way, and say, what, this is me, I apologize, let me try again, let me, however you decide to handle it. I often don't try again, because the cards that came up, and if I'm not reading well, it doesn't matter if 3 new cards come up, so I often won't do that. What I'll try to do, and this is where I fall down reading for myself, is that when I'm reading for myself, if it doesn't make sense, as many people do, I'll keep drawing cards to explain the ones I don't get until the whole deck's out, and I'm like, oh boy, yeah, I see what this means. Tarot's a joke. So I don't immediately try again for the most part, because I've learned that it doesn't work, especially when I'm having those times where I draw a spread and it just it looks like Sanskrit and nothing's happening. So that's the primary stuff. I guess the main takeaway. Oh, I'm already over 20 minutes. Hey, look at that. We all knew that was going to happen. The primary takeaway is that if you are wrong, or if the person you're reading for tells you you're wrong, just, okay, and then do whatever you're going to do, but don't put pressure on the muscle, because you're going to injure it. So that's why reading for yourself can often be a negative experience. If you do what I do and draw all these cards, what you're doing is you're putting more pressure on the muscle, and it's not going to function for you. It's not going to work. Um, you know, it's I mean, I guess the best metaphor I can think of in that case is it's like when you're in a conversation and the word you want was just in the stream of consciousness that preceded the language that was coming out of your mouth. You like, we know that experience, right? We're saying something and like the words, the sentences have already kind of formed in the back of our minds as they're filtering out of our mouth, as the previous sentence is filtering out. But that one word that you had a second ago just disappears. And the more you try to make yourself remember what it was, the more impossible it actually becomes to remember what the word you wanted was. It's like the more pressure you put on yourself to get that reading when you're not reading well, the more likely you are to injure the muscle, or to stop yourself from actually, that's how you get performance anxiety. I mean, I'm trying to think of a metaphor that's sort of beyond. I mean, it's like in sports, you hear about players who one day just stop being able to do it. They stop being able to do something they've been doing their whole lives. And they get into a slump. And sometimes those slumps are career ending. And I think part of that is psychology to like and put so much pressure to overcome the slump that you cripple yourself. It's like writer's block. If I've been going through a profound state of it lately. It's been really hard for me to write, and the longer those states go on, the harder it gets to write, because the pressure to get something out on paper becomes excruciating. And you can't create under those conditions. You can't hit a baseball if you're standing. I mean, I've never even tried to hit a baseball, let's be honest, but I would imagine, people who know about sports will say hitting a baseball is probably the hardest thing in sports to do, other than running a marathon, say. I would wager that it's hard to hit a baseball if you're standing there thinking about how unlikely it is that you'll hit it. And it's the same thing for reading. So the real danger is downward spiraling, when you have someone tell you you're wrong, or you do have a bad reading, or you do spread out the cards and they're just not making any sense. One of the things, if you look at the video I made yesterday, there's one thing you can try when, and I won't go through it again. You can watch that video because it was already an hour, and this one's close to a half hour. But in that video, I talk about how ignore the positions in the spread, ignore what's calling out to you, what just seems energetically the most interesting. And if I were in that position right now, I think energetically the most interesting would be these two, Judgment and the Ten of Swords. Just they have a real strong pull. So I would start talking about those two cards and ignore the rest of them for a little while, and then start drawing lines. But you can watch that long video if you want to. And again, I think it's worth pointing out that you're not necessarily wrong. As I said earlier, it's not you. It's sometimes we're sharing something that's too hard to hear, or that someone isn't ready to recognize yet, or that they do recognize and it's scary and they're not going to admit it to themselves, let alone you. And I guess that ultimately brings me around to the idea of feedback in general. When you do start reading for other people, friends, will often comment on it and they'll be impressed. It's hit or miss for the most part whether clients will, especially if you're reading for free on like a free reading network or something like that. So, when you are reading from a distance, the ratio of readings to responses can sometimes be very low, because, it's like anything else. The reading is about the querent. It's their issue, it's their experience, it's their question. And that's what matters to them. And that's what matters to us as a reader. But what does not occur to everyone is that you want to know whether you've hit the nail on the head or not, and that you've been helpful or not. And as someone who's learning something, and I think all of us are always learning, you want to know, because you want to know whether you're on the right track or if you're going down a different road. Um, and so you can certainly ask for feedback. And one thing I do when I read for others is I'll say, if you need me to clarify anything, or if you have any questions, or if you want to let me know how this experience was, just so I'll invite that without asking for direct feedback, and that often will prompt at least some kind of response. But even when you get good feedback, it's worth pointing out that that doesn't necessarily mean you read well. And when you get negative feedback, it doesn't necessarily mean you read badly. Getting negative feedback can be an indication that you read so well that the person isn't ready to hear what you said. Getting good feedback can be an indication that you told them what they wanted to hear, or that they're just impressed that you learned things that they didn't expect you to know, but you may not have necessarily provided them with useful information. I've had readings before where they've just been so impressed that I got what was the core of their issue. It didn't seem to matter to the person I was reading for that I wasn't able to say anything helpful about that stuff. And again, that gets, so here's why my videos end up too long, because now I'm going to go down another path. That doesn't mean that I read badly either. I clearly gave the person what they were looking for. And sometimes getting a reflection is as useful as anything else. In fact, my tendency to want to be a helper can be a bad thing because it's not my job. In fact, I think a great reading is like a mirror, and it's less like giving someone an answer. I think one of the most helpful things as readers we can do is be a reflection of someone's experience. There's a great book on coaching in the business world, which has a kind of dumb name. It's called Successful Coaching in a Week, but it's a very short book. It may be about 80 pages. It's a British book by a guy named Matt Sommers, I think it's Sommers. And in it he says a great coach is a mirror, and the reason why a great coach is a mirror is because a mirror shows us what we are, but it doesn't tell us what we should do about it. So when we get up in the morning and we look at ourselves in the mirror, the mirror doesn't say you need to get your hair cut or you look fat in that. The mirror just shows us what we look like. We say, oh God, this shirt needs, I've outgrown this shirt, or I need a haircut, or I need to trim my beard, or put on makeup, or whatever. The mirror doesn't tell us what to do. The mirror reflects it to us. The mirror empowers us to make change. A great coach who's teaching somebody how to do something just shows that person what they look like, what their performance looks like. I think as tarot readers or cartomancy reader or whatever, oracle readers, whatever we want to call ourselves, I think one of the most helpful things we can do is reflect experience back, and then allow them to make the change. Because here's the thing about advice anyway, right? Like, I don't know more about someone's life than the person who's asking me for the reading. Even if the reading is telling them something that they're not ready to hear yet, or that they don't want to know, it's kind of presumptuous of me to assume that they should know it, or that I have the right to know it and they don't, or that I'm smart. And this is a danger with people like me who are naturally very intuitive and naturally very smart. I'm not patting myself on the back. I have an ability, but it makes me a know-it-all. And I need to be careful when I'm reading for others to not tell them what to do. It's a big pitfall for me. I have to constantly be aware of guiding versus telling people what they should do. It's very dangerous, and I don't want that responsibility. But I also am, like most people, slightly codependent and want to be valuable. So it's something I have to watch out for. Just because I think I know doesn't mean I know. And just because I think the cards are saying, oh, you should do this, doesn't mean that's what they actually should do. So the best thing I can do is present to them the mirror, is be a mirror, reflect as much as I can to them, and then empower them to make whatever changes they need to make. Impressive or not. And so finally that gets to the thing that I try to remind myself of, and that I think it's useful to remind others of, is that it's tempting to want to be impressive. But the goal isn't that. The goal is to provide something true and useful. Whether or not it's impressive is secondary. It's not a magic trick. At least not to me. So, I'm 35 minutes into this 20-minute video, so I'm gonna go ahead and wind this up. But this is a bit of a ramble. It's not quite as structured as my old videos have been, partly because things are busy. Oh my God, Ben, shut up, right? But where I'm getting is, again, as always, I hope this is helpful. Let me know if it is. Let me know if it's not. Let me know what you think. How do you handle when the cards aren't coming to you, or when someone tells you you're wrong? Have a great weekend. Have a great week. Be good. Be safe. Be thoughtful and kind and all those things that we need more of right now. And I wish you the best. Be well.